Well, up to 500,000 angry customers can't be wrong, or can they? Anyone who's been charged for going over their overdraft limit is about to find out whether those fees are legal. The Office of Fair Trading is taking 7 leading banks and a building society to court tomorrow, claiming that charges on overdrafts are unfair, disproportionate and, in effect, against the law. The banks argue they're perfectly fair, but if they lose, they stand to pay out hundreds of millions of pounds, potentially, as John Sparks reports.
They're all household names and they're all being sued. HSBC, Halifax Bank of Scotland, Barclays, Lloyds TSB, the Nationwide, Abbey, Clydesdale and Yorkshire Banks. And this is why. Meet Paul Rubin, just one of 500,000 Britons who've rebelled against their banks. The subject of his ire, its high overdraft charges.
I had an overdraft that I was constantly, by the end of the month before I got paid, I was reaching the end of it. And I was just getting hit by these charges. I was right at the tail end. A direct debit would go out my account, and that was an automatic £50.
£50?
That happens twice,
yeah.
And that's a £100 fine. And I was getting that pretty much every other month.
The act of rebellion, it's that demand for a refund drafted in a letter this afternoon, but he may be too late. We understand that after a month of tough negotiations, 6 high street banks and 1 building society have done an extraordinary deal with the Office of Fair Trading, the government body charged with protecting the consumer. Tomorrow, the OFT will serve papers on them at the High Court, declaring their intention to sue. We expect it to claim that bank charges on overdrafts are unfair, disproportionate and ultimately illegal. We understand that the banks involved in the suit have settled approximately 1/3 of all claims from bank customers, and it's expensive. Recent research stated the industry has paid out some £200 million in refunds. Yet in terms of law, the banks feel they have every right to charge customers. Overdraft fees are a service to the customer, not a penalty.
The bank says that they make charges for the provision of services, and so long as they publish those charges in advance, then those charges are payable if you take those services. And that kind of charge is outside the area that's dealt with by the regulations.
Still, the OFT are relying on those regulations. They're called the unfair terms in consumer contracts. It will use them to argue that customers don't actually agree to high overdraft charges when they take out an account. The risk for both parties is considerable. If the OFT loses, it could be seen as weak and ineffectual. If the banks lose, it could be expensive, very expensive. A senior industry source told me we're pretty confident about our legal position, but it's still a roll of the dice. The banks have won an important concession in their negotiations with the regulators. All outstanding claims for overdraft charges will be suspended for the duration of the case. The bank's now ready to field calls from tens of thousands of irate claimants.
They're paying for time. I think they'll spend a lot more money on lawyers and trying to get themselves out of this, and they will just putting their hands up and saying, we've been fleecing you for years, have it back.
The banks are fed up, and so are those looking for refunds, so this case will settle the issue. Do the banks act fairly and proportionately, or do consumers expect too much?
Well, joining me now is the Chief Executive of the British Bankers Association, Angela Knight. Also here, Martin Lewis from the MoneySavingsExpert.com website, which has advised thousands of people on how to reclaim their bank charges. We'll be talking to him in a moment. But first, Angela Knight, your members must be doing some things wrong, otherwise they wouldn't be settling all these claims out of court.
I think we've got a situation here where, as you rightly say, there's been a lot of complaints. And what we've been waiting for is for the inquiry of the Office of Fair Trading to complete. But as time has been marching on and as the complaints have built up, but also the wider concern from individuals, it seems to us that the fair way forward for the customers is to approach the courts in conjunction with the Office of Fair Trading in order to look at the legal issues.
Do you accept that some people have been badly treated?
Well,
people who have sent letters demanding £30 for a letter.
Well, I don't think you'll find that's taken place. What we do know is that there are customers there who are concerned, and we, the banking industry, are trying to treat them fairly and openly. And of course, individuals can avoid getting into an unauthorised overdraft position. Ring your bank in advance.
How much have you paid out? so far in claims? Because obviously the suspicion is that you stand to benefit by suspending all these payouts.
No, that is not the case. As far as the actual sums of money are concerned, that is for the banks themselves.
Well, what's the total?
But in terms of what it is that we're seeking to do, it is to clarify the situation for all the customers, for complainants and for the wider community.
But what is the total that we're talking about in terms of what you've paid out so far and what you think it's worth in total if you lose?
Well,
what are the numbers?
No, the numbers are not something that I'm going to discuss.
Why not?
Because the numbers are for the banks if they wish to discuss them.
You represent all the banks, don't you? So you can give us a total.
I do indeed, and that is why I'm talking about the industry-wide issues. That is my job, and that is the necessary discussion that we have to have. Because, you know, the numbers, you're right, are one thing, but what we're seeking here is a serious clarification of what is an important issue.
Well, what do you think is currently fair? If somebody goes over their overdraft limit, what do you think is a fair amount to charge?
Well, if an individual goes over their overdraft limit, the first thing that it does is it triggers a credit check, and it looks at all the underwriting conditions there, and indeed, you know, that individual's record.
It just gives a number. What's a fair amount?
So it can be a significant process. And that's
all electronic these days, though, isn't it?
And that significant process has a cost involved. What we do have, though...
What is a fair amount? You're not answering that simple question.
These specific issues are the ones that are going to be discussed in the courts. I'm not going to prejudge a legal process. And one thing I think, though, that is very important in all this is that we've got, something like 85% of all individuals pay nothing for their banking in the UK. That is a unique situation. And I believe that we do need to keep a very careful eye on the whole of the customer base.
Can we just clarify that you have agreed that all claims are suspended as of tomorrow? You're not going to pay out any more out of court?
That is what the FSA's ruling is about. We are the banks seeking clarification with the OFT. We operate in both a legal environment and, of course, in the regulatory environment.
So everything's on hold until after
the
case.
decision of the FSA is that everything is on hold for the time being. And that, of course, is not unusual when a court case takes place.
Well, stay there for a moment, if you will, because I want to talk to Martin Lewis. I mean, what do you make of this deal? Is it as clear and fair as Angela says?
Staggered. I heard about it half an hour ago, and isn't that interesting? 1.3 million people have been doing this on my website. I've spoken to the other websites doing it. None of us were involved in this nice, cosy cabal between the OFT, the FSA and the banks. Lovely, by the way, to answer your questions. £200 million, Credit Suisse First Boston says the banks have paid out so far in 2007. It costs them £1.7 billion a year, and a fair sum would be just under £5 quid.
So what do you think's really going on?
What do I think's really going on is the banks have saved themselves a good £200 million by stopping this happen right now. Do I think this is a good thing? Well, we've been looking to get a test case for a long time. I put money up to pay barristers to go in court and do it myself already. So let's have a look at what's going on. The positive outcome, if we win, which we of course assume we will, then if what happens is the banks are told every penny you have taken in penalty charges must be paid back without people asking for it. That's what's important. They take our money without asking. They must give it back without asking. That would be 1.7 billion times 6, about £10 billion. Hurrah. If the end result is we win in court and they just simply say, right, OK, now we know they're unlawful, you have to ask to get your money back, then this has been a farce and the FSA and OFT have hurt, not helped consumers.
And, of course, you may not be able to become a party to this case.
We won't be. This is the OFT and the banks. There's no consumers involved whatsoever. We haven't heard, none of the groups doing this have heard a word about this. It's sprung on us tonight. We've not been involved. OK, we've only been representing a couple of million people. We probably haven't got much to do with it.
Martin Lewis, thanks very much indeed. Let's pick up two of those points then.
Of course.
First of all, why aren't the consumers involved in a more active way through these kinds of groups?
Indeed, we want to talk to the consumers too. That's absolutely right.
So you're happy for them to be party to the case?
The way the case operates is that isn't how it works. It works on a set of principles and how the principles apply to the unauthorised overdraft charges. So that, if you like, depersonalise it. As far as the actual point on penalty charges, no, these are not penalty charges. This is a particular area, the unauthorised overdraft fee. We want clarification for all the customers.
But if you lose the principles argument, will you pay back people without them having to ask for it?
What will be the outcome of the case? I do not know. Whatever the decision is of the outcome of the case, the banks will, of course, abide by it. We don't wish to keep the customers in this limbo for any longer. We are seeking full clarification.
Angela Knight, thank you for joining us, and Martin Lewis as well.